do scientists then how do you determine the truth then, I guess? What ways do you go about determining the truth or doing?
Okay, it's not a new question, by the way.
I'm a new interviewer, so
Pilate asked it to Jesus Christ several thousand years ago, what is truth, right? And he wasn't the first to ask it. But when it comes to the whole issue of the scientific aspect of this that we're dealing with, you will find that the man who wrote the ground rules for what scientists try to think they're doing, right, Francis Bacon back in the 1600s, he did not start from a neutral position. You can pick up his book, and we think of it as the scientific method. We've got all sorts of rules you teach the kids. First of all, you've got to have a problem, then you make some observations, hypothesis, test, etc. But if you pick up his book and you open it up to the introduction, he says, there are two books laid before us to stop us falling into error. First, there's the Holy Scriptures, which reveals the truth of God, and second, there is the creation which declares his power. Now that is a Christian bias, a Christian presupposition, a Christian faith. Why? Because Christians believe the world was made by God, God has stamped his nature on creation. If God is truth, the world can be trusted. Now in my particular field, that shows up historically very significantly if you say, why did the ancient Greeks find fossils but never do anything with them? Because we know they found them. They even invented words like that, right? But they never did anything with them. Answer, it ends up having to do with their religion. If you're an ancient Greek, you believe there were heaps of gods. The gods were like you and like me, except they were bigger. If we could get drunk, they could get drunker. If we could play tricks, they could play trickier. Right. So you put that in your mind and you dig up a fossil fish. Well, you're not stupid. Fishes don't live in rocks, right? So you put the fish back down and you shake your hand up at Zeus and say, you didn't fool me this time. You're tricking me.
Yeah.
And we know that because they wrote it in their books. The fossils were put in the earth by the gods to deceive us. So you need to change your religion in order to trust rocks.
So that was a bit of a mouthful. I'm just trying to pick out of that. What is it then that is it? So you don't trust the scientific process in this process that scientists
the thing that you can't trust unless you know what their bias is and where they're trying to get to. So you interview Richard Dawkins, or he interviews me like he did last year. I know he's an atheist.
Yeah. Right?
Question, Richard, what evidence would convince you the world was created? Ultimate answer, none. Okay, why are we bothering to have a discussion?
Right.
So you have to know the prejudice. And in modern scientific method, in the high school textbooks and the university college level, right through Canada, the USA, Australia, the hidden prejudice, I wish they'd tell us, is that science is a naturalist explanation without reference to God. Atheism or agnosticism.
Oh, that's my definition there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're amateurs, sorry.
That's all right. Well, I like the sign they have on their church here on Sunday morning. It says, God has a special message for you today, but he won't be calling you on your cell phone. Turn it off. I like that.
Perfect. Yeah, I always get a kick out of their slogans. I have to admit that they have up on their bulletin boards. I've gotten almost into a few fender benders while trying to crane my neck and see what's new up there. Okay, so back to this. Now, is it possible? Is it Mackay? Is that how you pronounce it?
Aye, it's Mackay.
Just like Fort McMurray.
Aye.
Right. Is it possible to be biased and still discover the truth or be telling the truth, I guess?
You will find that the minute you start to admit your bias, you're halfway in the right direction.
Right.
In other words, the minute you say, I am a human being, I do not know everything. Okay, you're the first step to saying, if I do not know everything, how much don't I know? And if I don't even know how much I don't know, perhaps I don't know much at all, right? Now that's called humility.
Right.
It's hard to get there because we like to think of we are mega brain creatures. We've invented Windows, etc.
And I guess Dawkins isn't a good example of a scientist with maybe humility.
Yeah, you're probably right there.
So I guess it'd be easy to pick him apart on that one. But it seems to me that scientists are constantly trying to tear each other down or test each other. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the process, and that they're honestly trying to get to the truth, and that they're willing to admit when evidence shows that, hey, they were wrong in a certain area.
Mm-hmm.
Now that seems contrasted with what you're doing as an apologist, which is starting out with scripture and then trying to or find natural explanations to explain
All of which sounds great until you realise here is playing field 1, right? And the rule is any explanation is acceptable except for those that include God. Now you say, okay, I'm going to play on this field and I will fight anybody for the truth inside that field. Until you get to saying, well, look, hang on, if God actually did create, what arguments would you be looking for? Oh, we're not going to go there. In other words, any explanation is acceptable except for that one. Now, the minute you say, okay, their method is fine, I've got no problems with their method. The method's quite a good one. But they have decided beforehand that there's one set of explanations they will not accept. In geology, it shows up with questions about the flood. One of my friends who's a geologist here in Canada, very naive guy to start with, he puts his hand up at the end of first year geology in one of your universities and says, Professor, how come we haven't discussed the evidence for Noah's flood all year? And the professor says, McDonald, if you're going to ask stupid questions like that, take an arts course. Oh, there's the playing field. That question's out here. We do not discuss it. That is not a search for truth.
So are scientists then asking the wrong questions or testing the wrong
Well, you only
things?
get the right answers to the questions that you ask. And if you ask the wrong questions, don't expect the right answers. So yes, that is part of the problem of our definition. It never used to be like that. Right? When you look at, say, geology, the word was invented by a clergyman. Right? The guy who gave us our modern view of science, Charles Lyell, and if folks go to our website, creationresearch.net, and insert his name in the search engine, it's amazing that he actually set out to get rid of Moses out of science. Most people didn't ever think Moses had anything to do with science, but most of our geologic strata layers have everything to do with a creationist view of the world. It was just, that was the bias then. Now the bias is anti-God, anti-creation.
Right, okay, so a little while ago you mentioned that you kind of contend with this scientific view that excludes God from it, kind of right at the get-go. How do you go about testing for God or testing your hypothesis? What kind of questions?
I'll give you a good, accurate historical example. You heard of the theory of electromagnetic radiation? Do you remember the name James Clerk Maxwell? Okay. Anyway, big name, big theory, really. James Clerk Maxwell was trying to figure out what light was. Light's a mysterious substance because you can't sort of get a bucket full, you can't cut it in two and look inside. It's going so fast it's pretty hard to catch up with, right? So James Clerk Maxwell, unknown to most people because they leave this out of the textbooks these days, was an evangelical Bible-believing Christian who believes that God was a God of law and order, so his law would be seen in the creation. God said, let there be light. Okay, the book of Romans says God has stamped his nature on creation. You're a Christian, what do you believe God is like? Father, Son, and Spirit. The big fancy word the theologians invented ages ago is Trinity, or three in one. So James Clerk Maxwell already knew there were lots of threes in the creation. There's three basic states of matter, there's three basic dimensions, there's three primary colours, three notes to a music chord, etc., etc. So he took a leap of faith based on his Christian faith. Light will be having three components somehow.
Right.
Now he ended up inventing a big long formula, but this is what you do in high school. The electric field, the magnetic field, and the tertiary vector.
Right,
and it works, right? It works. But it was a faith-based leap to say, here's the fact I'm trying to explain, here's what I believe about it, and it actually works. So there's not a disparity between the faith and the facts. The only choice is which faith you start with, and if you pick the wrong one, you'll end up with the wrong